Welcome to the Connector 302 Temporary Redirect Show, giving you the opportunity to step away from the grind of working in your business and investing 30 minutes to listen to people who can help you work on it. Hello everybody and welcome to another 302 Temporary Redirect Show. I'm Glenn Marvin and today we've got the incomparable Kevin Biggar on the show, adventurer, ultra-marathon runner, TV personality, business coach, whatever he sets his mind to, he seems to smash it out of the park. We're going to be talking about some of the things that he's done in the past, trekking to the South Pole unsupported, rowing the transatlantic rowing race. God, what hasn't he done? Run 100 Ks, run 60 Ks, run a marathon in a tutu, run a marathon in a dinosaur suit. And just as importantly, doing some amazing things with businesses, helping them set their goals, facing their fears, overcoming obstacles and challenges, and doing some great shit in general. So I'm going to bring Kevin in. Welcome, mate. Welcome on board.
Hi, Glenn. Thanks very much for having me.
Great to have you. I'm going to rip straight into a couple of these questions. Just one thing I'd love for you to really go into first of all is just the what's the 2-minute backstory of Kevin? You know, I met you, God, how long ago now? 10 years ago now when I first bumped into you. Not long after you'd done the transatlantic and released the Adventures of a Fat Boy, right? So, you know, tell us your backstory. 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, I lived a pretty conventional life. I grew up in Howick. Went to schools out there, did my OE, and then things went along quite normally until I turned about 32 or 3. And then I suddenly had this realization that I'm not sure that my life was where I thought it was. If you had asked me when I was 14 about where I'd be when I was 33, I wasn't doing what I was doing. And I wasn't necessarily doing bad things, or off track particularly, but I had this for the first time. I think guys age in a different way than girls. Guys, they're 22 until suddenly they're 32. And I turned 32 or 33 and I could see the rest of my life. And I was thinking, now is the time for me to grab hold of the reins and try and tick some things off the bucket list because I'm running out of time. That's what I thought. So that's when I decided to quit my job, sell my house, leave my girlfriend and go back home and live with my mum. As I tried to figure out what to do next, I really hit the crisis big time and sat on the sofa, tried to work out what to do. Had a bad attitude, though, because everything seemed hard. Everything seemed difficult, like taking on some of the things I'd like to do, like be an astronaut, for example. Seemed a bit tricky. And then I came across, was watching TV one night. I saw a clip about the last person to complete the transatlantic rowing race. And when I first saw it, I thought to myself, I bet that's not as hard as it looks. And it turns out it actually is quite hard, so I quit. And then 2 years later, I found myself at the finishing line having won the race. And that's what I talk about now. How did I do? I'm under 2 minutes? Probably just. You're
doing great. Carry on. You've then got the trek to the pole.
So then came back. I actually worked for telecom for a little bit. And I mention that because sometimes you hear Olympians talk. And when they say how to do things, you think, but that's okay for you because you're 7 feet tall and you've been doing what you're doing since you're 3. And I very much wasn't like that. I am the people in the audience that I'm talking to. I was them. I lived their lives. I worked for a government department, worked in the private sector for telecom and smaller companies, and worked for some very small companies as well. And so I know what it's like to be in the cubicle under the fluorescent lights, looking out the window, thinking there must be something else. And so I did that a little bit more again at telecom, and then I thought, South Pole, why not? In fact, I wanted to do that before the rowing race, but it seemed too hard. It seemed to be the stuff of mountaineers and supermen. Once I did the transatlantic race, I realized it's just a question of learning some skills, and I could do that. So then after the race came back, and pretty soon after that, the TV show began, the First Crossings TV show, where we got dressed up in the clothes of the original explorers and recreated their expeditions. And that was an amazing job. I had the best job in the world. Oh, hey, you got a picture. The best job in the world for 3 years. We did 3 seasons of that. And since 2007, I've been full-time speaking. I speaking and do workshops. And I talk a lot to companies about how to take on a large challenge. Taking on large goals is kind of my thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Taking on large goals. People look at some of those challenges that you've undertaken.
Yeah.
All right. Transatlantic, I don't think many people can comprehend, and a lot of them will go, oh, well, look, it's rowing, you need a certain set of skills, and you've got to be a bit of a nutter to want to be out in the water. Anyway, I think a lot of people can potentially relate to trekking to the South Pole because it's walking, and you're dragging a sled behind you. But bloody monumental. I mean, how did you, number one, I think, prepare yourself physically for something like that? And number two, there is a massive amount of risk. And so I know there's a substantial amount of training and that you needed to go through to mitigate risk.
Well, I mean, I don't want to throw away my life either. My mother had a good, who I was living with when I was doing the rowing race, she had a good line. She said, Kevin, you're going to sea in a coffin. And so I looked very closely at what the base rate risk was for both of these things. How risky is it? And there's sort of two sorts of, let's say two lumps of risk. But before I get into that, I want to say something else. When you hear these stories about people doing things that I've done or people have had massive life changes, they sometimes describe a light bulb going on, like a moment of a light bulb. And I never experienced that. That's not my experience. Every step was considered. And so we may well have not be sitting here now talking about a trip across the Atlantic. We may have been talking about a trip swimming down the Amazon or something like that, because if I decided that the Atlantic was too risky. It was a type of thing I was looking for. And yes, the race had to be safe. And one of the main sticking points, let's particularly talk about the transatlantic race, is death. That's a downer. Either you get to the other side or you die. And people have died. And that was the very first thing I did, was to research how risky is the race. How many people have been lost in boats rowing across the Atlantic Ocean since 1874, when a couple of Norwegian guys did it? The answer is 6 boats have been lost. And that's a lot of, that's a lot of boats, because at that point, probably only 50 people had rowed, maybe less. I think less. Jamie and I were the 50th people to walk to the South Pole. Isn't that amazing? As few as that.
Yeah.
But I think fewer boats. And so 6 out of 50, that's a worry. That's a concern. And here's the weird thing. The boats were always found afterwards intact, with no people on board. So that tells you it's aliens, Glenn.
Absolutely.
Aliens are sucking people up off the boat.
Or mermaids.
Or mermaids. Now, what it tells you, though, look, this is it's a really fundamental point. So no, we're having some fun with it, but I didn't want to talk about it. I had a real epiphany when exactly this time, when I was worried about the risk. As I was tossing up which adventure I should do, was talking to a guy who came back from the South Pole. He'd just been back to a trek. I don't know if he went to the South Pole. He was definitely down on the ice. And I said to him, "What's it like down there?" And he said, "It's okay." And I said, "Isn't it cold?" He said, "You know it's going to be cold. You take warm clothes." I said, "What about all the crevasses down there?" He says, "You know where they are. You walk around them." And suddenly it really was like the scales had fallen from my eyes, because then I could see that what he's saying is, if you know it's going to be bad, if you can tell me within 30 seconds of hearing about rowing across the ocean that you're worried about X, Y, and Z, then that gives you a lot of time to deal with X, Y, and Z. What you're really concerned about is uncontrollable risk.
Yep.
So, with that attitude, I could go back to the rowing race and say, well, the boats are always found afterwards. As long as if I am religious about using a safety harness and keeping it on at all times. And this class of boat, because this class of boat used in the race, we were in the third time there had been a transatlantic rowing race. This class of boat had proven to be very sound. It had capsized a few times, and that was a real risk, is that you would, particularly if you were in the back cabin, you'd flip over, you would undo the hatch to come out, but you'd flood the boat, you'd be stuck on top of the boat. But that's okay. You've got a safety beacon. If you can stay tight on the boat, you'll be safe. Now, there's two. I talked at the start about two pots of risk. The first risk is death. The second risk is that it's excruciatingly uncomfortable. And if you know it, but again, he answered that. If you know it's going to be cold, wear warm. You can wear warm clothes. and so I could. That made me think. It didn't have to be painful. It just. I could do it. I could take the risk out. And in fact, the secret of these events is that they seem worse than they are. I'm pretty certain I could drop most people into a rowboat, and they would get to the other side. That's not quite true in the South Pole. You need to train a lot for that. That's cold. That's horrible. So you asked a question about training as well. I went and saw a very, very good coach. You've heard of John Ackland, but some of the audience may not. John Ackland from Performance Lab. If you can get hold of him, he's very, very hard to get hold of now. But if you can, he's the perfect man for the job, because he has a very holistic view of performance and logistics, and very good at unconventional ultra distance training. And he set me up. He set me up exactly right for these events. But that's just one of the things that you're going to be looking. Yeah, you're going to tick off. You're going to worry about all your kit. Making the best boat, the fastest boat, making sure your skis don't break. What's the best lighting? There's lots of issues you have at the start, and the advantage you have is that you can anticipate them, and in the year you have, or 2 years leading up to the event, then you slowly tick these things off.
And I know nutrition is a massive part of success or failure in both of those expeditions. So talk to me a little bit about calories in, calories out, and weight loss, because I know definitely on the trek to the South Pole, there was some serious weight loss went on there, wasn't it? Yeah. And nutrition is the absolute key. We nailed it in the Atlantic, and I figured that problem wasn't quite so hard. You could take as much food as you wanted. We were throwing food out because we had too much food, and different types of food. We were much more restricted in the South Pole because you have to carry everything that you take, and so you tend to go towards fat because that's the more energy-dense fuel. And research shows that humans are great at metabolizing fat. Might take you a little while to get used to it, but that's what you need. But we underdid the carbs a little bit, and so we would bonk. I have never been on a cycle, like on a road cycle, and ridden so far I completely ran out of energy. But I read about these things in books like by Lance Armstrong, and what he describes they go through sounded exactly like what we were going through near the end of the day. You lose ability to plan. Your vision isn't particularly good. You're slow. You stumble. You can't make choices very well. We used to have to be very careful about saving a couple of squares of chocolate that we would eat just before we set up camp, so that would sort of come back to life a little bit, and then get into the tent at the end of the day. So we were eating about 6,500 calories of food every day on the way to the pole, and losing about half a kilo every day on the way to the pole. We start off enormous, like inflated versions of ourselves that end up shriveled little prunes. So anybody, wanting to instigate a wonderful weight loss plan, then just going for a stroll to the pole is probably a fantastic idea.
Yes. Honestly, I think you burn a lot of energy just dealing with the cold. More than anything, yeah.
What about the mental side of it, dealing with that day in, day out? Because whether it's work, whether it's anything like that, I know one of the things that I love about endurance and ultra events and everything like that is facing that suffering and what it does to you psychologically when you come through it. And at the end of each day, you're absolutely shagged, but you still get up that next day, put the shoes on, out the door you go, and you just keep on doing it. But when you complete that goal, it's just the most amazing euphoria. So, I mean, did you experience that yourselves? I mean,
yeah. We really shafted ourselves going to the bowl. when I ran the I did the 65K in the Terra Wearers, and I looked at my watch afterwards, and it said I burnt about 7,000 calories. And I was thinking, that's what I did every day down in Antarctica, and I feel really shagged now. But I don't feel as shagged as I did at the end of the day. And I would have had to wake it up and do it all again. Yeah, just as you say, I found it hard to believe. And so it's your question, what I've definitely felt that. There is an issue when you gouge a bit too deep. You know, it takes a while to bounce back. If you have to go right down to the core of your bones to keep moving, and it's painful and you're suffering for a long time, then it's a few days before you get a bit more perspective on the event. You probably have just been through something like that yourself with your own 320K mission.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So that if I was to ask you immediately afterwards, did you post that Facebook post about you finishing immediately afterwards?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's a day later.
Look, I tell a lie. When I got to the South Pole, I wanted to keep on walking, because we've been programmed so much to walk, that it was strange to stop. But I think your question is there any advice about doing things like this for people like ourselves, people who take on a goal? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to say that there was some magical advice, but the best advice is to break it down into little chunks. That's what we did. We had goals for ourselves, particularly in the ocean. Every 24 hours, we could tell you exactly where we wanted to be to get to the finish line. And in the South Pole, every day we had a schedule for how far we had to get that day. And to wait a day to get updates was too slow. So at the end of every shift, every 90 minutes, we'd get the GPS out, turn it on, and see how far we'd walked since the last one. And then after a little while, we could tell how fast our pace was, whether or not we were going to make it in the end.
Yep.
Yeah. There's only one way to take on a big. There's only one day to take on a big task. It's to break it down and just focus on that little thing. It's just funny you say that, because I've just written this year. I've started. It's been a very productive year for me, and there's been a number of changes to my routine. But one of them is I've written a little app. I've actually written an app, Glenn. I've gone IT just like you do, and it's a very simple app. All it does, I put in all the things I have to do, what my projects are. It shows me one thing, the next thing. I don't get to see the rest. No, just the next. Do the next thing. Because the worst enemy of your goal is every other goal that you have. And particularly after a couple of coffees, I've got serious monkey head, and I'm just, whatever's bright and shiny, I'm there. And so to have something that just focuses me on one goal is very helpful.
And I love it how you broke that down as well, because one of the things that I love about ultra events that just completely mess with your head is I think they are so relatable to business in general. And it's one of the things that keeps on bringing me back is if you're at the start line and all you think about is how far you've got to go to the end, it just seems insurmountable. But if all you do is you focus on what is the next thing that I need to do, what is the next corner that I need to turn, what is the next aid station that I need to get to, what is the next achievable task that I can complete that is going to keep me moving in a forward direction, then you can get that relentless forward motion. And I take so much myself out of these events that I apply in business, and I love it.
I think I saw the link to the post. I don't know whether you wrote it or not. The one, why entrepreneurs should run ultras. Is that something
co-written? Yeah,
co-written. I'd love to read it. I haven't read it yet, and see what your examples are. There is some strange synergy between the two things. The year that I ran the 100K was the year I had the best year of my business, and I wonder, regardless, there's something about what you're saying. It's also if you can. having to do an ultra means you have to set your business up so it runs by itself, because you're going to spend lots of time training. Maybe it makes you think about your business in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. So there is something about that, about endurance. And I'd have to say the best ideas I get, it's a very important part of my day to run, because I think that blood flushes through, and it's almost as good as having a shower in terms of getting ideas. I'm much more, I get some of my best ideas when I run. So maybe there is something about entrepreneurs and ultra distance running.
I think there are so many analogies that you can draw in comparison. But moving on from that a little bit, you hit the speaking circuit. You've been on the speaking circuit for a long time now. You're a seasoned pro there, and you do coaching. And one thing I really am fascinated by, and I want you to go into a bit of detail on, is your mindset around failing and planning. Because I know that's something that you're focusing on a lot at the moment.
I'm focusing a lot on failing, and it sounds a very unsexy topic to think about. If I was going to write a book, it's a book that's never been written. I tell a lie. It has been written. I probably have it on my bookshelf. Seth, the marketing...
Seth Godin.
Who's the marketing? Seth Godin wrote a book called The Dip, which is about when to quit. And that book about when to quit, it's never... someone hasn't written that book yet. But what it's such an important question. When do you stop working on something? When do you have... Because our popular culture, winners never quit, quitters never win. It's all about persistence as a virtue, which is nuts if you're doing the wrong thing. But no one ever talks about that. But about failure, I guess, like I said, my core business and what I think about it a lot is about how to help people take on a large challenge, a challenge that's outside what they seem they're comfortable of. And one of the main regulators of that is what people consider the consequences of failure are going to be. I was doing a lot of thinking about goal setting last year, and I came up with a question that stumped me for the longest time, which is, how hard should your goal be? How hard should your goal be? If you're going to set yourself a goal, how hard should it be? That's a tough question to answer. And I found myself thinking a lot about failure and how we relate to failure. And I came up with some great ideas. I'm going to try them out with you. I've been trying them out in my workshops and speeches, and I've got some good feedback. So the idea is that we tend to, because we're concerned about failure, is a big part of the maths that we do, the mental business case we do about why we take on a big challenge. And if that factor is too large, then we tend to take on smaller challenges than what we want, or we're half-hearted about the big challenges we take on. And we keep going only until we see a sign that we're not going to make it to the end, which we quickly get because we're not trying very hard. And I think the way to get out of that is to look at fear, or the fear of failing, or the consequences of failing, in the two aspects. One is the physical side of failing, so all the physical things that can go wrong, and then there's the psychological side. So physical is the actual things that happen when you fail. And we tend to think, I think, because we watch a lot of sport on TV, that like boxing matches, for example, that winning and succeeding and winning sounds strange, are the same thing, and that it's every goal you take on, it's winner takes all. Either you reach the goal or you don't. Either you're successful or you're not. If you don't reach your goal, you get nothing. It's more like gladiators in a ring. Either you win or you get to eat sand. There is either you win at the Olympics, and it can be brutally close, but if you're second, then you get nothing. So you've got to win. You've got to be successful. There's no point taking on a goal you can't reach. And that's the problem with that type of thinking. We think that our goals, all the benefits you get are when you achieve the target that you have set yourself. And when you think about it, that's true if you're in a bomb disposal line of business. If you don't succeed, you cut the red or the blue wire, either you're very successful or you're dead. If you're being shot from a cannon, either you land in the net or it goes wrong. If you're starting a land war in Asia, then either it's going to go well or you're going to be dragged out for years. or you're doing a back flip on a bike, for example. You can't do half a back flip. Either you're going to land it and be good, or you're not. When we watch a rugby match, either your team's going to win or it does not win. That's what we think. When we look closer, it's not like that. The benefits, the effort, if that was on one axis, and the benefits you get, or if that was on the other axis, they're either a ramp or a step. So either the more effort you get in, the more you get out, or the more effort you put it up to a little point, and then either you're very successful, you land the backflip, or you don't, you land on your head and you're dead, or the bomb goes off. And my wager is that most of the time we have ramp-like goals.
Yep.
If you're trying to reach a certain sales level at work, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to do well in an exam, you actually are on a ramp. It doesn't matter. If I'm going to do my filing here, I've got a big pile of filing, which I don't do because it's a big pile of filing. I'm killing myself because it's a ramp. I just have to do a little bit. I do a little bit, I'm better off. And the problem is that we think that all of our goals are step goals. We think it's winner takes all. I don't do my pile of filing because unless I can see a clean basket at the end, I'm not going to let myself feel the dopamine rush. I'm going to say to myself, I've failed, I'm a loser, I'm a quitter. I don't say those things, but so that's what's going on.
So if you can't, if at first you can't succeed, don't try at all.
Don't try. Exactly. I had one of my coaching clients has set himself a weight loss goal last year. Didn't look like he was going to make it. Like, to lose 5 kilos in 5 weeks or something. Didn't think I was going to make it. So he quit.
Mm-hmm.
But he was losing weight. He just wasn't making it in time.
I didn't make it in time.
Yeah. What about?
It's not going to happen for me.
Another great example is the ultra, like the 100K race. A funny story about that. 2 months when I first applied, I actually was too late. I got on the waiting list. 2 months out, exactly 2 months out before the race, I got a phone call from the organisers saying, your numbers come up on the waiting list. You've got 24 hours to make up your mind. You want to be in or out? And I'm like, what do I do? Do I take on this or not? It's crazy. I ran a marathon a few years ago. I can't run. I'm not going to run 100 Ks through the jungle. Most likely I'm going to nose down in the mud about 50 Ks, all right? So as I was going, but wouldn't it be amazing to have done it? So as I was going back and forwards about this, I went to the website, the race website. And the very first frequently asked question was, clearly I wasn't the only person who had this problem. The very first question was, I don't think I can make this. And you know what their answer was? That's the point.
The point.
The point of taking on a large challenge is you may not make it. And let me put this in context. An ultra marathon like that, that's a ramp. Yep. If you don't get to 100 Ks, no one comes out to the course and shoots you in the head. You hobble to the aid station. And every K I did after 42, I'm a winner. Yep. I was thinking about it as a step. I've got to win. Otherwise, I'm a loser. Completely wrong. And so we frighten ourselves with the specter of losing to motivate. Because when the stakes are higher, we tend to have more focus and more motivation. And look, that's fantastic. But we have to know that is what we're doing to ourselves. And it's useful to have a tool to drag us back to the optimal motivation zone occasionally. Because you see it in sport, actually, too. You see it in the second half of a rugby match. A team gets a few points on top of them, and they fold. You see, there's a great clip I show in my workshops. Nick Kyrgios, the tennis player, just patting the ball back in a tennis match like it's a Sunday afternoon because he's given up completely. When you have a step goal, absolutely fine. Let me just say two things. Often it's not a step. You're telling yourself that it is. But let's say you're telling yourself it's a step goal. It really matters that I have to make this goal. That's absolutely fine. But you have to be conscious that if it ever seems to you that you're not going to make it, is your motivation going to tank? And if it does, that's bad. Then you've set yourself up to fail. Near the end of the transatlantic race, Jamie and I had lost our lead. We had a lead at the start. We'd lost it to these guys. They were 70 miles in front. And we had been trying to catch them. Nothing had seemed to work. And we'd just proven to ourselves we couldn't catch them. And I had told myself, winning was everything. We had to win. We have to win. Now we're not going to win. What do we do? Well, why don't we just coast to the end? Just cruise to the end, come second, but look like we could have come first if we'd been so uncool as to want to try hard. Because we still putting in a lot of work just to be behind these guys 70 miles. Third place was a long way back. So Jamie and I could see our motivation was about to go off the edge of a cliff. And what we had to do was remind ourselves, really turn the race from a step goal into a ramp. So now we said, we set ourselves a cascading set of goals, sort of good, better, best goals. So we said, if we're not going to win, we're still going to try and win. If we're not going to win, we're going to come second, so close as they haven't had a chance to have a shower. That's going to be a psychological dead heat. Third, if we couldn't do that, then we were going to try and beat the world record, or the old world record, and so on and so on. And so there was always a reason for why we should be putting maximum work out. So that's the difference about turning up. So that's my first insight, is your goal as risky as you think it is? Is it really winner takes all, or just the better you do, the better off you are?
I absolutely love that mindset, and it actually brings back a memory of one of my proudest dad moments. Last year, 14-year-old daughter had her heart absolutely set on getting into the A netball team. And she comes, I got a text from her after the teams were announced, and she said, "Dad, I didn't make the A team, but I'm going to prove to everyone that I can be the best that I can be in the B team." And
that's good.
And that for me sums up that whole motivation of never giving up. And because it wasn't, she didn't lose. She didn't lose at all. She was still the same person. She still had the same skills. She was still doing the same things. And she was going to work her ass off to be the best that she could be at the level that she was at. And on that whole, I know exactly how you felt when you were in that situation on that boat. When I was doing that ultra a couple of weeks ago, I was in a situation where I went into that with less Ks on my feet in the 6 months leading into the race than the race actually was. And there were points in that whole race where I was praying for my body to give up. I was praying for their...
It was slowly giving up, but you wanted a proper broken leg.
I was praying for them to pull me from the course because I was suffering so much.
You were hoping a car would swerve and
hit me.
You the mercy of death.
Yes. But again, it's just breaking it down, micro goals. I'll just get to the next aid station. I'll just get to that next day. What happens when I wake up tomorrow?
Don't worry about that.
Because you're a better person for finishing what you can.
Yeah. Exactly. This is still by far like twice the longest distance you've ever done, I imagine. Is that correct? Yeah.
No, absolutely.
How many people did get to the end?
102 out of I think there are 134 entered and about 120 odd started. So it was a good completion rate, I think.
That's impressive. But I guess the event self-selects for absolute no. Not just...
You have to be a little strange.
But people who know they are strange, not just people who wonder if they are.
Yeah.
Hey, so the other part of it, go on.
Carry on.
So I was going to rabbit on about failing some more, because I've only just done this sort of the physical side. The psychological side is you can have a ramp goal and say, look, I know that I'm sales. I'm based on my there's nothing tricky about my sales. I'm based on commission. I know that if I sell one or two more units less or more than last year, it's not the end of the world for me. But by God, I am going to do well this year because I want to beat what I did last year, and I will be number 1 in the office, and I will be number 10 in the region, and because that's what juices me. That's what gets me up. So stop trying to deflate my motivation. I am going to win this goal because I'm a completer. I'm a succeeder. I bend the universe to my will, and that's absolutely fine. I think that's a very powerful way to think. But I think you also need to keep in mind that there are some very good reasons for why you may not make your goal that don't reflect on you. And there's a distinction that I don't often hear being made, maybe you've heard it more than me, is that there's often uncontrollable elements in goals that we set. And I've heard it called process goals or strategic goals. Strategic is not a great word for this, but process goals, you control every aspect of it. Mm-hmm. You can control how you implement your sales plan, your marketing plan. You cannot control your sales or your revenues for the year because that involves knowing what your competition is going to do, what the market changes, what Donald Trump does, things that are completely outside of your control. And so, yes, you need to keep those strategic goals because they're what you're trying to optimize, and you become more efficient and innovate. And maybe you'll think of ways to control some of those things that seem uncontrollable now. But really, you really want to focus on those things that you can control most of all.
And bad sales leaders, bad sales managers, and bad business leaders call those uncontrollable elements excuses.
Well, that's a good point. And you've been a sales manager, so you know. So
yes.
I should talk to you about this to think about. But yeah, I think I had one of my coaching clients set himself a great sales target for the year. He looked like he wasn't going to make it until the last 2 weeks. I met him yesterday. He said, "You'll never guess, a client came out of the blue. I've made my target." Completely unexpectedly, much more than normal. It was just a sheer fluke of luck. Is he suddenly, what can he learn from that? What should he take from that? Do you know? Similarly, if he had missed, what should he take from that? And I don't think he's a hero if he succeeds, and he's a failure if he doesn't succeed. We need to judge him on his plan or his process. And don't get me started about plan or process, because that's my pet thing. We focus too much about goals as if they're some magic thing that are going to we're going to be transported towards, when we need to focus much more on what we do every day. And that plan, and iterating that plan.
And also look at what didn't work rather than what did work. I know founder of Sequoia Capital, Donald T. Valentine, used to spend twice as much time, or an interminable amount of time, analyzing all of the investments that they failed at, because they got so many more learnings about what they did wrong that they could then help execute on the next investments to make sure that they did them right. And so every failure is a step towards success.
Yep. I hear that a lot.
You take the learnings.
And it's true. I think when you fail, you're much more receptive and motivated to learn. The problem that I have with failing is that often our success relies, and let's say you control it completely. So let's not talk about luck or outside factors. Let's say you go into a sales meeting and you are trying out various different ways of doing things. You succeed, you win the business, and then you know that everything you did was right, or the things that you didn't do well didn't matter. If you go and have a meeting and you didn't succeed, all you know is of all the A, B, C, D, E of things you did, one of them was wrong. But which one? Logically, you learn more. It seems to me you learn more from when you win. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about failure some more.
Yes.
I want to talk about successful people failing. And it's all to do with uncontrollables, really. That's the background theme of all this. If you success, let me see. A person with you can make a bad choice. You can make the best choice and still get a wrong outcome. Let me explain. Let's say you go to the racetrack. You've got $100. You want to make that money last throughout the rest of the night. So the best strategy for you, undoubtedly, is to bet on the favorite on the next race. You'll get more chance of having your cash the rest of the night. Now, that favorite may not win. It was still the best idea. It's still the best thing you should do. Again, when things are outside of your control, you can make the best decision and it still not turn out the way that you want. And similarly, you can make a good decision and have it not go the way. You can make a bad decision and have it and fluke your way in to luck. Yep. So what it means is that when you fail, you've got to be careful about the judgment that you make on yourself. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a friend of mine and I bought an investment house at the same time. We bought two completely different places using different mindsets and rationale. Hers has done really well. Mine's done okay. And I've thought a lot about this as a big investment choice, about whether or not I'd made the right choice. And the more I thought about it, I was thinking, actually, I wouldn't change anything. I think it was the best choice. Just like if you have the decision between you putting in your savings in a well chosen set of stocks, a group of stocks, is smarter than choosing any one particular cryptocurrency stock that's at the moment. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get higher returns over here than over here. And your friend who tells you that he bought $50,000 worth of zero shares when they were at 35 cents isn't smart. He was lucky. He was taking a gamble. The other thing about failing is failing. I guess this is my last point. I guess I'm getting near the end of the hour, but my last point is failure can be your friend in this difficult world that we live in. Well, that we all work in success, in business, and try to find success. You cannot sometimes sit down at your desk and logic your way to the answer. You have to go out there, chance something, doesn't work, chance it again. Your fail is a much better way to think about it, is a necessary step. And if you're thinking your failure is a big deal, then you do need to step back and think, have I set myself, am I in this world where I need to take a series of small risks and change and find my way through it? Let me give you 2 examples of what I'm talking about. In my speeches, I always used to, when I first started speaking, I used to judge myself very harshly at the end, thinking, was that the best possible speech that I could do? Between me and Tony Robbins, how big is that gap? And that gap was always really big, Glenn. I never walked off happy. Since I've stopped judging myself by that and thinking, what have I learned? Is the client happy? Number one, is the client happy? And given the list of maybe 5 things I was trying in this speech, did they work? And ever since then, my performance has shot up dramatically because now I'm learning. The other people who do this and are very good at doing this because they have the same issue of you cannot figure your way to success. You've got to feel your way to success. Comedians. I read a little bit about comedy, and Amy Schumer, for example. She had a good piece of luck. It turned out to be a tough learning lesson for her. It was she won a competition early on when she was starting out doing stand up. She got the chance to go on a bus tour. She played 40 huge concerts, huge events. She said she went out 40 nights in a row and died. And I say it was good luck because it was a huge learning experience for her, but also it was bad luck because normally the standard amongst comedians, all the good ones that you see, they always try their stuff out in the suburbs. They go to the Midwest and they die. They try out. I mean, they just don't know what works. You're the joke that's funny on the page. You don't know till you get out there. And so they know, they iterate. They bump the head back and forwards till they get until they work their way forward, until they find the good stuff. The thing I love most, my icon, when it comes to success, is the Roomba. You've heard of the Roomba? It's that robot. It's the little disc-sized robot. Now they could pack it. It's a vacuum cleaner, so it goes around. They could pack it full of radar and artificial intelligence and lots of smarts. Instead, all they do is it detects that it's hit something, it swivels and it turns, and it cleans the whole floor. That's how we should think. No one screams at the Roomba, "You've got to want it more. Winners never quit. There's no I in team. Come on, Roomba," because motivation's not a factor for it. It just needs to have a simple set of algorithms that's very effective, and when it hits a obstacle, backs up, resets, heads out.
Yeah, I've always said to my teams that as soon as if you continue to compare yourself to the person in the desk next to you or somebody at another company, the more you compare yourself to others, the slower you will grow. If you focus on what you're doing and try and make incremental growth and make sure that each day I'm doing something that is, I've looked at what I've been doing, and I'm going to make just a fraction, just a 1% change. Every day you're going to get better, and you'll find there is a massive step change in regards to your personal growth. And that flows through to professional development and all those other things in your life. And it's amazing seeing what happens when people take the competition away and just focus on being happy within themselves and achieving stuff for them and them only.
Yeah, I've heard it said a quote like, don't be 50 before you're 50. I know that's hard for us who are very close to 50, but the idea is don't, you know, you're not going to have years and years of experience before you have years and years of experience, and don't expect yourself to.
Yeah. Absolutely, mate. Well, are there any key takeaways that you would want anybody to take from your lessons today before we wrap things up?
Well, I'll send a summary through to you, but I guess when it just to summarize what I've said, when it comes to failure, really look at the underlying stream of benefits. Is it really all or nothing? Is it a winner takes all kind of thing, or is it the more effort you put in, the better off you're going to be? And be careful that. Let me leave you instead of summarizing. I'm going to leave with one point, which I think encapsulates all this. It comes from a conversation I had with the same coach mentioned, John Eklund. We used to go back and forwards about success and failure and winning and losing. And he was saying, Kevin, you have to win this race. You have to win it, win it, win it. There's nothing, no one gets second. There's no point coming second. Second is first. Loser. You don't want to be a loser. And I said, look, he was so dogmatic about this, I wanted to tease him a little bit about it. So I said, look, it can't all be about winning. It can't be winning is everything. I said, what if I lose because I swerve and save a small child's life at the end? What if I win but my main competition isn't there? What if I win but I take drugs or something? You know, they can't all be about winning. And I went back and forwards on this for some time until finally he said something which summed it up just perfectly. He said, of course, winning isn't everything. He said, the best that you can do is the best that you can do, but you don't get the best out of yourself unless you commit to a really tough goal. So to commit to a tough goal is you have to commit to a tough goal and play a game on yourself, knowing that that is what you're doing. But at the end of the day, the best that you can do is the best that you can do.
And you use that tough goal to motivate yourself to be the best you can be.
Tough goal to motivate yourself and scare yourself with the bogeyman of failure. But the best you can do is the best you can do.
Legend. Hey, thanks so much for your time today, mate. Look forward to catching up again in real life.
You can go for a run sometime when you get your legs back.
You're running? What's that? Giving up. Fantastic. Hey, thanks again for coming on. We will catch up soon. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you later. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.